Author's background. Antonio Figapetta was a Venetian scholar and explorer. He joined the expedition to the Spice Islands led by the explorer Ferdinand Magellan under the flag of King Charles I of Spain, and after Magellan's death in the Philippines, the subsequent voyage around the world. During the expedition, he served as Magellan's assistant and kept an accurate journal which later assisted him in translating the Cebuano language. It is the first record document concerning the language.
In the late 1400s, a great new age of European exploration began, led by Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian sailors. They made great voyages into the unknown, full of danger, adventure, and discovery. These pioneers were driven by Christian zeal and profit. In Europe, spices like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, which grew only in the Far East, were worth their weight in gold. Whoever controlled their trade was guaranteed immense wealth. By 1518, the route to the so-called Spice Islands was dominated by Portugal. Spain wanted a route of its own. Enter 38-year-old Portuguese sailor Fernão de Magalhães. Ferdinand Magellan, as he's known in English, was a brilliant navigator who'd spent many years sailing the Indian Ocean. But he'd fallen out with the King of Portugal, and now offered a bold plan to his rival, King Charles I of Spain. Magellan believed it was possible to sail around the New World and reach the Spice Islands from the east, since, contrary to popular myth, it had been widely accepted for centuries that the Earth was round. King Charles accepted Magellan's proposal and helped him assemble an expedition with 270 crew and 5 ships known as carracks. The fleet set sail on the 20th of September 1519 and crossed a stormy Atlantic to reach the future site of Rio de Janeiro in modern Brazil. Here the men traded with local tribes, exchanging simple objects like metal fishhooks and playing cards for fresh food and water. Magellan continued south until winter storms forced him to camp at Puerto San Julian. There, Magellan faced a mutiny led by Spanish officers convinced he was leading them to their doom. Magellan acted swiftly and ruthlessly. He sent loyal men to kill one of the ringleaders, while another was captured and executed. 2 others were marooned, left behind when the fleet sailed south again in August. As Magellan searched for a passage west, one ship, the Santiago, was wrecked, though the crew were saved. Another ship, the San Antonio, deserted and sailed home. But Magellan did discover a 350-mile strait, which now bears his name, through to the far ocean, a sea that seemed so calm, he named it Mar Pacifico, the Peaceful Sea, or Pacific Ocean. But the Pacific Ocean was far bigger than they'd estimated. The Ana Islands. But when the islanders stole one of their boats, fighting broke out, and Magellan had to leave without fresh provisions. A week later, Magellan and his men became the first Europeans to reach the Philippines, where they were able to feast on bananas and coconuts. With Magellan's Malay slave acting as translator, they sailed on through the Philippines to Cebu. where they made an alliance with a local ruler who agreed to be baptized a Christian and swore allegiance to the King of Spain. A local chief from the island of Mactan then asked Magellan for help in defeating his rival, named Datu Lapu-Lapu, and Magellan agreed. He crossed to Mactan with 60 men in boats. But though the Europeans had superior weapons and armor, they were massively outnumbered. After burning the enemy village, Magellan's men were driven back into the shallow water, where Magellan himself was cut down as they tried to reach the boats. Now, their former allies on Cebu turned on Magellan's crew, butchering 30 of them in an ambush. The survivors fled. With only enough men left to crew 2 ships, they burned the Concepcion and continued their search for the Spice Islands. They traveled to the Muslim court of Brunei on Borneo and were amazed by its splendor. They reached their destination, the Spice or Maluku Islands, today part of Indonesia. They traded everything they had for all the clothes their 2 ships could carry. But as they prepared for the long voyage home, the Trinidad sprang a leak and had to stay behind for repairs. Its crew later tried to return to Spain across the Pacific, but most of the men became sick or died. The survivors had to return to the Maluku Islands, where they and the Trinidad were captured by the Portuguese. The Victoria, the last and smallest ship of Magellan's fleet, sailed west for home, captained by Cape Verde. On the 8th of September 1522, almost exactly 3 years after their departure, the famished, exhausted crew of the Victoria cast anchor at Seville, Spain. Just 18 of the original crew of 270 had made it home.
Content analyze. Identify the description and custom and tradition mentioned in the document that have. They are 3 types: socio-culture significant, political significant, and economic significant. What is socio-culture significant? The culture of the Filipino during the period is heavily mentioned. He described the people of Latroni as freed, has the describe of women as white and tall, but their teeth were red and black because he thinks that the woman through it was beautiful. In the other islands, the local treated him with the food and shelter as an act of friendship. One king of the islands would raise his clasped hands towards the sky and towards his guests before fasting with him.
Identify and describe places. Islands of La Journée, where the Spaniards encountered thieves. In the island named Zamal, the Captain General desired to land on another island which was uninhabited and lay to the right of the above-mentioned island in order to be more secure and to get water and have some rest. Zuluan is where the king of Zulu from who made friends and exchanged goods and information. The island where the king of Zulu and the Spaniards met is called Humunu. The Spaniards discovered islands, a district, and called them the archipelago of San Lazaro, as they were discovered on the Sabbath of Saint Lazarus. When they left Humunu, they shaped their course towards the west, southwest, between 4 small islands, namely Senalu, Hunanghan, Ibuson, and Abarian, Butuan, and Calagan, were the islands of Rahakulambu and Rayashawe. Captain General asked Rayakulambu and Rayashawe which port was the best to get food. They applied that there were three, namely Ceylon, Zubu, and Kalaghan. Mazawa is where they remained for 7 days, after which they laid their course toward the northwest, passing among 5 islands. In an island of Gatigan, there are bats as large as eagles. They killed one of them, which resembled chicken in taste. They set out westward from Gatighan, but the king of Mazawa could not follow them, and consequently they awaited him near 3 islands, namely Pulo, Ticubon, and Puzon. Spania was mentioned by the interpreter to talk about where the Spaniards came from.
Contextual analysis. What are the factors that could have influenced Antonio Pigafetta in the writing of the document? Europeans were colonializing the world during the period of imperialism. In Seville, Pigafetta heard of Magellan's planned expedition and decided to join, accepting the title of supernumera and a modest salary of 1,000 maravedis. Pigafetta could have deemed his exploration as somewhat important to the world that he may collected extensive data concerning the geography, the climate, the flora, the fauna, and the native inhabitants of the places that the expeditions visited as a record of their journey. He may have collected their story as a job of supernumera of the voyage, or he could have taken this information as a personal.